Most of us have heard of the game of typing a date into Google followed by the words Florida man, and you will find something crazy and kooky that a man in Florida did on that date. This week we're going to look at something that is far more insane than kooky and certainly not a game that took place in Florida on September 18th of 2014. That is the date that a man in Florida made a hauntingly calm phone call to a 911 operator after he had done the absolute unthinkable. He made it known that he had killed much of his family and he intended to kill himself when the authorities arrived. Hello, and welcome to episode 143 of Gone But Never Forgotten, the murder-suicide committed by Don Stewart. Don Stewart was born on December 11th of 1962, and he would later be married to a woman named Christina Stewart, and the couple would have 3 children, Kyle Stewart, Josh Stewart, and Sarah Stewart. One could quite easily say that the family did not have very many great times, and that they essentially struggled for the entirety of their existence. As we will discuss, much of the family found themselves in and out of trouble with the law and in and out of jail over the years. Don Stewart had an extensive rap sheet to his name, including being arrested in 1990 on a felony fugitive warrant, misdemeanor battery, drug charges, and depriving a child of food and shelter. His first major brush with the law would come at the hands of something that sounded like an accident and a tragedy, but still wound up causing him to be sent to prison. In 2001, Don was hunting and walking through the woods with his sons Kyle and Josh when he was pointing out rust on the rifle to the boys, and the rifle that he had accidentally fired and hit Kyle, his youngest son at only 8 years old, directly in the head, and it killed him. Don did not come up on murder charges for the incident, but the state did come after him for the fact that he was in possession of a firearm as a convicted felon. This was certainly a moment in the life of Don when things went from treading water, so to speak, to far, far worse, and you can only imagine so. Not only had he accidentally fired a shot that had taken the life of his youngest son, but he also wound up pleading guilty and going to prison for a 3-year sentence. That haunting accident would tear Don's family apart. As a part of the trial, Don's wife Christina would write a letter to the court and to the state regarding sentencing. Christina begged for the state to have mercy on him when it came to sentencing, because she said that Don had already punished himself far worse than any prison or jail sentence could possibly punish him. Christina said that Don would spend parts of every day crying, and he had fallen under crippling depression as a result of the accident. She went on to say that every time that the phone rang at home, she feared that it was the jail calling to tell her that Don had taken his life. At the time, Don was worried about 2 things, according to people that knew him. He was concerned about leaving his family behind while he served time in jail, and he was completely and understandably destroyed by the fact that he had killed one of his sons. And Don's concerns, if that is accurate, proved to be right. While he was in jail, the dynamic of the family changed a lot. I could not find a specific timeline for when he and Christina divorced, but I did find many accounts that laid out what life was like for Sarah and Josh while Don was in jail. Sarah was only 15 years old when her dad was sentenced to those 3 years in jail, and by the time that he got out of jail, Sarah had 3 children, and she was also taking care of her brother Josh. Things for the family can certainly be said to have fallen apart in the wake of everything that took place after Kyle had died. After Don was out of jail, the family seemed to be on a constant spiral and cycle of poverty, drug addiction, and domestic violence. They were always dealing with drug use, crippling debt, and repeated arrests by seemingly everyone that was in or around the family. In the end, the family seemed to almost be on an unmistakable death spiral that was leading them towards tragedy in some form or fashion, and yet nobody seemed to be able to do anything to help prevent it, if they were even truly aware of it. Over the years, Sarah would have 3 more children with a man named James Stewart, but the end result was that both James and the father of her other 3 children were both in jail, and Sarah was in constant battles with them to pay some kind of child support. Sarah was forced then to live with Don in a dilapidated shack that was on the property that was owned by James's family, while James was in jail for battery and for dealing in stolen property. Sarah herself was also no saint. She was on probation after a 2013 arrest for grand theft, where she had stolen $400 out of the wallet of an acquaintance. She had also been charged in the past for theft, battery, and illegal drug use. Sarah has been described by those that knew her as a woman who had a good heart, but who always seemed to be fighting life uphill, and always seemed to be struggling to keep a roof over her head and food in the mouths of her 6 children. To say that the entire family was very well known to police then would be an understatement. As I laid out, it seems that everyone had had brushes with the law. They had come to the home on many occasions for domestic disputes, and in a small town like the one that they lived in, which was Belle, Florida, that meant that everyone else in the small town knew the family's dirty laundry as well. On one such occasion, when Sarah was only 22 years old, and she was also 8 months pregnant with her 4th child, she had called the police out of sheer desperation because she said that Don was violent, and she said that she was afraid of him, and she told the police that she had literally nowhere else that she could go and nobody else that she could turn to for help. In that incident, Sarah said that Don had pushed her up against the refrigerator with a lot of force, and he had then closed his hands over her face, causing her a great deal of pain. In the summer of 2008, she appeared in a Gilchrist County court, seeking domestic violence injunction against Don. She said that she was very afraid of him, and she knew what he was capable of doing. She also said that Don had threatened to make her life a living hell if she ever called the authorities on him. Thankfully, she did make that call, but in the end, she did not ever follow up on her request to receive a restraining order against Don. Don was, however, sentenced to 6 months of jail time around that time on a battery charge. When Sarah was 25 years old, Don had also taken her to court because he said that she had been collecting child support for one of her children who had in fact been living with him, and so he said he needed and deserved to be receiving that money, not Sarah. Sarah was ordered by the courts then to pay her father back $6,578 at the rate of $100 per month. The Spirits and the Stewarts were not only known to law enforcement, they were also known by the Florida Department of Children and Families. There were times over the years where the children were removed from homes and situated in foster homes, but ultimately they were always returned to the home that they lived in with Sarah. Sarah, in the end, was forced to live with Don because of her lack of a job, her lack of resources, and because she suffered from epilepsy. Everyone in town, though, knew for a fact that Don did not like his grandchildren at all, as he constantly berated those children and called them names in public and did not treat them with any regard or any care of who else saw him treating those children in that way. Further to that point, on September 17th of 2014, Colleen Stewart, who was a great aunt to the three youngest children, would come to the home, and she and Don did not have a good relationship at all. Don felt that Colleen had turned Sarah into a prostitute, and he said that Sarah had been receiving money from a man who was only known as Jose. It would later be found that Sarah had only had sex with Jose on 2 occasions, receiving $25 on September 16th and $70 on September 17th before Colleen came for her visit. It's been alleged that one of the reasons that Colleen had come to the home that day was because she was owed a part of the money that Sarah made having sex, almost as though she had become a pimp to Sarah. This fact infuriated Don to no end. He was embarrassed for himself and for his family. Colleen would later report that when she had visited that day, she had heard Don tell Sarah that neither her nor her children were worth anything to him, and that she should tell someone to come and get her children out of his house because he did not love them, and in fact he hated all of them. It was also said that Don had apologized for saying those things later and admitted that he was frustrated because Sarah was not working and because she was making money as a prostitute. Don himself had also been on a very violent spiral. It was believed that he had taken himself off of his medications. He had been smoking spice, and his violent rage had been escalating, especially towards Colleen and any members of the entire Stewart family. Many people believed that Don was bipolar. And then came September 18th. I am about to play for you a very chilling 2-minute 911 call that came into an operator. The caller is Don Stewart, and he was relaying to the operator what he had just done and what his intentions were moving forward. This call was short, and the call is incredibly chilling when people found out that everything that he said was accurate.
Gilchrist County 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I just shot my daughter and shot all my grandkids, and I'll be sitting on my step, and when you get here, I'm going to shoot myself.
What is the address that you're at, sir?
2550 Northwest, 25 Terrace, Don Stewart. Every one of them are dead.
You said your name is Don Stewart?
Yep.
All right, Don, what kind of gun do you have?
It doesn't matter what kind of gun I got. They're all dead, and then when you get here, I'll shoot myself, and then you figure out what kind of gun it is.
How long ago did this happen, Don?
I don't want to hear it, man. I'm done with every fucking thing. Just bring the motherfuckers out here, that's all. You got all the kids are dead in the house.
Okay, how many people? Okay, how many people?
6 kids, 1 adult.
6 kids and 1 adult?
Yeah. One of them is a baby.
All right, Don. Is there any way you can stay on the phone with me till I get somebody there to help you?
What's that?
Can I have you stay on the phone with me?
No, not that. I'm waiting for them to get here. When they get here, I'm going to shoot myself on my back step. All I'm doing is waiting for them.
So you're sitting on your back steps?
Yep.
Okay, Don.
With that call, calm and collected, Don told the operator exactly what he had done. As you heard, he admitted that he had killed all 6 of his grandchildren, and he had also killed his daughter, Sarah. This call took place at roughly 4 p.m., and 9 minutes later, the first units arrived on the scene from the Gilchrist County Sheriff's Office, and Don was found pacing outside of the home, unarmed. It was reported that he only had what appeared to be a jug of water in his hand. Don told the deputies on the scene that he was not mad at them. He was mad at the Stewarts. He said that Colleen had turned Sarah into a whore and that she had gotten Sarah into drugs. And he said that the Stewart family had ruined his entire family, and he was fed up with all of them. He said that they had also ruined his life. And he went on to tell them that he had had enough, and so he had taken care of all of the problems. When Don was asked to come to the roadside and to show his hands, he responded by saying that he had already killed them all. When he was asked who he had killed, he said all of the children inside. He said that all of the kids were dead inside of the trailer, and Sarah was dead as well. When Don was asked where Sarah was, he pointed at a tarp that was in the front yard, and he told the first responders that she was right there, underneath the tarp. Don would then go back to the back of his trailer, and he returned with a semi-automatic weapon, and he shot himself in the head. Everything at the scene after the deputies arrived was caught on audio and video from dash cams, up to and including Don's suicide. As deputies rushed to search the premises, they sadly found that everything that Don had said was, in fact, true. Sarah's body was partially covered by the tarp, and she had been shot in the head and also stabbed 6 times. Sarah had also suffered blunt force trauma from being pistol whipped. Inside of the home were the bodies of all 6 children in different locations inside of the home. The youngest child had died from a gunshot wound to the torso, while the other 5 children had all been killed by a gunshot wound to the head. On that day, 6 people were murdered. Sarah was 28 years old. Caleb Kuhlmann was 11 years old. Kylie Kuhlmann was 9 years old. Jonathan Kuhlmann was 8 years old. Destiny Stewart was 5 years old. Brandon Stewart was 4 years old. And Alana Stewart was 3 months old. Don Stewart was 51 years old when he committed the murders and then took his own life. 4 of the children had been attending school at Bell Elementary School, where they were enrolled in kindergarten, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and 5th grade. Hauntingly, a teacher would say that all of the children had been at school on the day that they were murdered, and that they had boarded a bus home less than 2 hours before they were found by the first responders. It would later be found that social workers had even sent parole authorities to the home a month before the murders took place. And after the murders, the agency in charge never really spoke up about why the children were still at the home with the rising violence that was well documented and reported, and after Sarah and her boyfriend James had been found smoking synthetic marijuana in front of the children while they were both on probation. The agency only said that they would assess their interactions and their interventions with the family in the wake of the murders. Well, that sure seems like something that will get swept under the rug, but there certainly seems in my mind to have been plenty of evidence that these children were not being raised properly, taken care of, raised in a safe environment, or raised in a loving environment. And yet, they were all left exactly where they were. Listen, I know, and Lord knows that we have covered it here on the show, that the foster care system is not the be-all and end-all either. But my goodness, if someone had seen that these children were not safe and done anything about it, odds are that 6 young people would still be alive and with us today. I'm not saying, of course, that there were clear signs that 6 people were going to lose their lives inside of that home, but it was clear that it was not an ideal environment for children to be growing up in. Lieutenant Jeff Manning of the Gilchrist County Sheriff's Department shared those sentiments when he said, quote, "I don't know how you get clear signs that something like this could happen," unquote. He also said, quote, "It's a difficult scene to try to fathom why somebody did what they did," unquote. There is no doubt that what went down inside and outside of that home on that day was disturbing to a level that is almost unfathomable. I cannot imagine the horrors that the first responders walked into that day and the horrors that they saw and undoubtedly live with them to this very day. The thought of coming across 5 children under the age of 12 who had their lives stolen from them by a gunshot to the head is something that I don't think I would or could ever forget. What stuck out to me about this case is the fact that prior to it, Don had accidentally killed his own young son. And before that, it seemed that the family had at least coexisted, and you can certainly understand why Don or any parent would have a hard time moving past the fact that he had taken the life of his own son at his hands. But what stuck out to me even more was the fact that 4 of the 5 children, all except for baby Alana, were also killed with a gunshot to the head. I couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this was Don's PTSD striking here, or if he just knew from past experience that the death would likely be quick for all 4 of those children. Either way, it is certainly shocking that he would commit murder in the same exact way that he had killed his son by accident. This one sticks with me a little more than most. We have covered family murder before on the show, but 7 lives taken in one short burst of time is certainly crime and carnage on an entirely different level than most cases. This case is still viewed as one of the most gruesome in Florida's history, and you can certainly see and understand why. I will close this episode by thanking all of you for listening in each and every week, and I want to give a very special shout out to all of the patrons of the show who help keep the lights on and help keep things rolling. If you would like to support the show in some small measure and get even more episodes, also get ad-free episodes and many other perks of all shapes and sizes, please come join us over at patreon.com/GBNF podcast. Every little bit truly helps so much. And so, I will see you back here again next week for another episode of the gruesome and horrific true crime that we all seemingly cannot get enough of. In the meantime, please be well, and of course, be better. Thank you for listening to Gone But Never Forgotten.